think we need to set up a policy where we just record by default. At least for some of my delivery meetings, that'd be nice.
Then you wouldn't have to remember.
Right. But also, if I miss a meeting, I can always go back, watch it on
Exactly.
the screen.
Yeah, that's the cool part about it for sure.
Yeah, like there's a stand up at 9:30 that I'm missing for this meeting, and you know, I don't think I'm gonna have any action items out of it, but I could just, you know, watch it later over my lunch break or something. Or just listen to it.
If you're not there, you may get a few more action items. Right?
Exactly.
So, I don't know why you're assuming that. Like,
but I am the PM on the project, so it's
okay. All
I
right.
should probably be aware of who's doing
what. You can delegate if someone assigns it to
you. Right.
Let's see, I think Mark joined as well. Hey, Mark.
Hey, everybody.
How you doing this morning, Mark?
Doing well.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, you have a very colorful background, Joe.
Thanks.
Is that just window reflection, or is that?
It's a pride flag I have in the background. I have it blurred out, so it's kind of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wasn't sure if it was like hitting some prism. Your light was hitting some prism on your.
That's what it looks like too. I was like,
going, what is Floyd for a second?
We'll wait a couple minutes here. Usually we have quite a few people at these Teams Academy sessions, but it looks like maybe a little lighter attendance today, which is fine. Hey, Donald. Welcome.
Good morning or afternoon, whatever time it is.
Hey, Maggie. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you.
And say we'll probably kick off at 9:05. We actually have a lot of stuff to cover in an hour, so we don't want to wait too long. And if people jump in the middle, I think that's fine. Maybe we can just do some intros. Joe, do you just want to kick it off? Should we just get started?
Sure, yeah. I just want to welcome everybody to the call. I'm sure we'll get a few more people to join as we go. So thank you. A little bit of background on these Microsoft Teams Academies. We've been hosting these once a month for several months now. And basically we use this as an opportunity to sit down with one of our consultants and focus on a particular aspect of Microsoft Teams from a IT or technical perspective. Chris has kind of been the star of the show for the last several months and probably going to keep it that way because he's been doing a great job. But it's kind of some ground rules for this meeting. We have about an hour-long presentation, and we're going to keep the call going until 10:30 Pacific. So it'll be about a 90-minute call with a 60-minute presentation, and we want to use that last 30 minutes or so to focus on more of a conversation of, hey, what are you thinking in terms of apps for your business and Microsoft Teams, but also if we want to expand it out into a more general Microsoft Teams Q&A, you're certainly welcome to come off of mute and turn on your camera and engage us in a conversation. We're also looking for topics for the next meeting. If you have any thoughts on what you'd like to see at the next Teams Academy in hopefully about a month or so, feel free to reach out to me and be happy to take it into consideration. Otherwise, just look out for the next meeting. Any general questions before we get into it? Did I forget anything, Chris?
No, that's great. Thanks for the intro, Joe.
Yeah, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
So again, yeah, this is my name is Chris Nelson, the Modern Workplace Center of Excellence lead. I've got some contact information up there. If you have any questions or want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you're welcome to do that. I just wanted to give a little background first on why we're doing this presentation now. So last year, I think in 2019, we started speculating that, hey, and Microsoft was definitely kind of making some noise about application development in Microsoft Teams. And what we've noticed lately, especially, I think their plans basically were accelerated. After the rush to Teams kind of happened earlier this year and is continuing, now they're saying, hey, we have so many people in this environment. We're going to start rolling out the application development capabilities within Microsoft Teams. And even last week, we had some new announcements around that with some pretty major enhancements to Microsoft Teams, which I'll show a little bit of some screenshots and previews of some stuff that's coming in the next couple months. But also I'm going to go through and what we are using today to build apps within Microsoft Teams. So yeah, the language that Microsoft using is today, that they're using now to describe Microsoft Teams it's funny because like Satya Nadella at the Build conference, I listened to his keynote speech, and when he started talking about Microsoft Teams, he literally described it. First sentence was, "It's a scaffolding for your apps." Basically saying, yeah, he even moved beyond the whole, hey, you can collaborate here, you can communicate, you can do video conferencing. He just skipped right past that and said, this is the place where you're going to build apps. So definitely they're moving in that direction, and we're trying to get prepared for that. We're trying to understand what that means. We're trying to develop the best practices, trying to really understand, how we can help our customers going forward. So I'm going to give a little kind of overview of kind of the different tools that we use to develop apps in Microsoft Teams. Obviously, I'm not going to have time to go over all of these. I'm going to go through the ones that I think are the most applicable and most interesting. So first of all, Microsoft Teams itself, when you think of it just developing apps, this is really what end users are doing. And I'm going to talk about that just a little bit. Then we have Power Automate, of course. We have Power Apps. We have DataFlex. That's the new announcement. So that is coming in the next couple months. And then we have some of the, older custom development frameworks that we've been using for a while, like SharePoint Framework. There's a new Teams extension for Visual Studio. And then there's the Teams Graph API, which is rapidly getting expanded as well, so that you can control Teams from a remote application. Who knows? I may have missed some here, but I think this is a pretty good list of the major development tools that you can use with Microsoft Teams. So I'm going to go over really those first four. I'm not going to get into the highly technical ones. That's really custom development. It's a much bigger topic. We actually do some presentations on that where we showed developing SharePoint Framework code and deploying it into Teams and publishing it and using the Graph API as part of that. But today I'm going to focus on those first four. So Microsoft Teams itself, when we first started setting it up, I'm not going to spend much time on this, but I always think of the way that I set up a team itself. I try to think of what is the problem I'm trying to solve and what is the application I'm building with this team. And there are many different kind of applications we can build just out of the box in Teams. So project management is a typical one. Oftentimes we have channels that represent different phases of a project, and then we have standard objects within each of those channels, standard tabs. So we'll definitely have a OneNote in there. We might have a planner. We might have some sort of tracking spreadsheet or an issues list for each of those different channels. And then we try to have a standard structure for each of those so that it's easy for users to move between projects, understand the objects that are in those projects. They use the same kind of tools. Of course, Microsoft has so many different tools to achieve any particular thing. So it's up to each organization to decide what are they going to use. Are they going to standardize on something, or at least narrow the options that users have? Those are some of the decisions that we make when we build an application just using Teams. And other things that we've built is really like an email alert aggregation. We're trying to build an app there where, hey, we have all these alerts we get from all these different systems in different places. We can have every channel receiving emails, and then we can have people subscribe to different channels, and so then they are then tasked with responding to those alerts when they come into those channels. So it's another type of application of Microsoft Teams that doesn't really require any code. So again, I just encourage you to think about channels or teams in that way as sort of mini applications, because that really helps us define the use cases, the requirements, and reusability across different teams and things like that. Now, Power Automate is usually the next level. So when Power Automate has, you can work with Power Automate tools or build applications. And I really call these, they're really small applications typically. And they do have now these adaptive cards. So it's not just a matter of starting a workflow and letting it run, or just doing a simple action, but you can actually build these new adaptive cards, which provide a nice user interface for gathering information or presenting information in a simple workflow that's presented in Teams. And those adaptive cards can be used in a bunch of different applications as well. It's not just for Microsoft Teams, but it works really well in there. They've really worked to make those pretty compatible with Microsoft Teams. So I did want to show a quick example of that. I've built an application for employee recognition. Just a moment, I'm going to switch my screens up here. And so I'm using one of my a test tenant here. And what I've done is I've built a application. So it's just a couple steps here where I'm allowing users to post recognition or recognize another employee within the context of a conversation. So the idea there is we don't want them to go to another system to have to recognize an employee. We want them to be in the, so many of the interactions are happening in Teams today, in a chat or in a discussion board or in a meeting. So we want, in that context, we want them to be able to do some key actions, and employee recognition is a great one. So there's a Teams event for a selected message. So when a user selects a message, they can trigger this flow. And what it will do is that it will go in there, and you insert adaptive card information in here. So it's some XML or JSON or something, and it basically defines what that little adaptive card looks like. It's pretty easy to kind of learn this language, and there's thousands of examples of adaptive cards that you can pull from, which makes it actually quite easy to build the adaptive card you want. And then based on a condition in there, it's going to post a message back to the same board that it came from. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of show what that looks like here. Really simple workflow. So in this, I've got a test account. So I basically posted in this channel, and I said, hey, how did the sales presentation go? And I can put in something here. It says, whoops. And then what I can do is I've added this under the more actions here. So there's provide feedback, I've called it. Here's the adaptive card coming up. And I can say specific recognition. And I can say, submit that there. And now it will go through, it'll post that to a system where we basically record our employee recognition so that people can get that specific feedback. We might have a monthly contest for the most recognition, or some sort of awards, or some other system like that to be able to present that information. So we're trying to just make that's a very small application, very easy to do, but it allows for an important function to occur right in context, and that's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to provide links to systems that are outside of this context, but we want that application to live right in the context. Any questions about that? I don't know if people were aware of things like that there are all these flow actions based on teams, but I wanted to call that out. So I'm going to go to now a lot more sophisticated example. So this is when we get to Power Apps, and this is right when we want to create a really nice, highly interactive, very polished application. But more than that, similar to the prior example, that we want the applications to understand the context of teams. And in Power Apps, a lot of people don't know this, but you can pick up the context of teams when you deploy that application into teams. So then when you have that application in there, of course, you can have the rich workflows from Power Automate in there. And you can deploy these applications really broadly, which is nice. So that's not the case for all these types of applications, which I'll talk about later. But for Power Apps, you can drop in an application into pretty much any team that you want to, and it'll adapt to the context of that team. So I'll give you an example of that. This is based on a more real-world scenario. We have a situation where sometimes people don't want to use the native admin interfaces in Microsoft Teams, and that might be because they have some restrictions or policies, or they have some compliance issues. They need to have approvals happening, like when you add a member to a team or you add an owner to a site team, you need to have like an action occur or something. It's need to have the information recorded in a system. And they want to make that a lot easier to track down that information than it might be to try to go through log files in Office 365. So we can create simple administrative interfaces for Microsoft Teams. And the nice thing is like it makes it actually, because it understands the context, it's just one application, but it knows what team it's in. It knows what the members of the team are. It can basically grab any of the information it needs. We also, typically when we work with our customers, we also track a lot of metadata about teams. So we'll know who the owners are, the department that owns that team, or any compliance policies or security settings that we might track in a separate list aside from the built-in admin interfaces. So I'll take a quick look at what that looks like, and then I'll show a little bit like how I built that. So what we would do in this case is for every team in the general tab, we would just add a team support tab. So in the general channel, a team support tab. We drop that Power Apps application into that tab. It's just simply adding a Power App. And so we have a really simple, streamlined interface that just shows the key things that we expect people to be able to do. So in this case, we can either remove members or we can add members to this particular team. I'm showing down here just almost for debugging purposes. I'm having Power Apps return the context down here so that I can see, oh yeah, this Power App definitely recognizes that it's in the ICU shift management team. So I'm going to go ahead and add an employee as a member. Well, first, let me make sure. Okay, so I want to remove a member. I can see there's 3 different members here. I'm going to go ahead and remove Matt. And so what I have here is a simple process that will basically ask for an approval before Matt is removed from the team. So I just hit this big X, and that's all that needs to happen there. Now, again, I don't want to have people leave the context of Teams because people are really living in Teams. So I don't want to have to go out to Flow and go to approvals there or go to some other system. So I've pinned the Flow tab or Flow application into the navigation bar over here. You can do that at an enterprise level, or individual users can do that, or different sets of users can have different settings. So here I go to Flow, look at my approvals. So there's a little note here. Chris wants to remove Matt Budwell from the team. Just confirm that. And now when I go back to Teams. When I go to remove a member, I should not, yep, he's gone from the membership list now. And now I can easily add him back. A little search tool, so I can search through all the users that are out there. Hit add, that's all I need to do there. Go back to my Flow approvals. Confirm that I want Matt added. Go back to my team. And there's Matt, he's back again. I can remove him now if I want to. So that's a really nice little application. These are fairly easy to build, although they can obviously get more complex depending on requirements, but at a very basic level, with just a few functions, it can be pretty straightforward. And again, what it does is it allows me to really focus users on what they need to do rather than having to see all the different options. Like if I go into a particular, into the actual managed team, you know, there might be a lot of different interfaces in here that I don't really want them kind of necessarily grant them access to. Or we have policies or compliance issues, again, that we need to track actions that happen. So it's nice to have these interfaces for that reason too. Now to build that, the context is actually quite simple. So here's Power Apps. There is a action up here. So when I make this on visible, there's a little snippet of code that I'm grabbing here where I'm just saying, hey, set the selected team, set the selected channel, get the team name, and then I have some other variables for hiding and showing objects. But this is all the code that I need to kind of get that basic information that understands context, although there are a lot more context variables that I could get. You know, things like locale, which would tell me, I guess, which you know, region they're in or time zone. You can get the theming of the site. You can get you know, various member information, owner information, privacy settings. So there's a rich set of context that you can grab that would be useful here. And you can use commands in either Power Automate or even within Power Apps to then fulfill some of these commands. So if you want to update site settings, you know, we could have a little panel where users could change the privacy of site and then have it run through a workflow and get approved that that change is happening, and then update the site to have the proper site privacy. Any questions about that? Anybody? Okay. Hopefully that's straightforward. So the last thing I want to talk about in depth is really data flex. So this is where we're seeing a lot of changes. I think this has really been accelerated because of the rapid adoption of Microsoft Teams. So Microsoft recently rebranded the Common Data Service as DataFlex Pro. So the CDS, it's an expensive product. It's not a light investment. So it's kind of prohibitive for a lot of people, and you really need to make a big commitment to it before it's going to pay off. But it is a fantastically powerful service. It really allows you to build your organization around this common data service. So Microsoft wanted to come out with a lighter version of this so they just called the light version DataFlex. And DataFlex is going to be built into Microsoft Teams and included for free as part of it. Well, it's included in your license for Office 365. And every team will automatically have its own DataFlex environment included with it. So that will live behind the scenes, and that DataFlex environment will contain all the apps, the bots, the actual data itself, workflows, permissions, all those types of objects built in DataFlex will live in that environment. And the reason they're doing that is because obviously they want Microsoft Teams to be an application development environment, and these objects are critical to that. Today, Power Apps is pretty good, and you can build really nice applications in there, but the data storage in SharePoint, which is really the only real database tool that you have today within the Office 365 licensing that you get by default, is SharePoint. Now you can buy into SQL Server and other tools that give you more of those capabilities, but out of the box, all that users have really is SharePoint lists. So this is kind of what DataFlex will look like. It will be more of a it's almost, in this case, access-like. And that's certainly going to be an issue because you're really talking about citizen developers here. They'll be able to, of course, I assume you'll be able to turn off these services or control who has access to them. But it will provide a lot of the same capabilities as Microsoft Access might. Hopefully in a more structured way, in a way that you can kind of, IT people can keep track of what's going on. But again, yeah, it should unleash a lot of creativity, but it might unleash a lot of wacky development as well. Some unstable code or, undocumented code, making it difficult for IT to support these specific applications. But it's going to be there. I think it is a good opportunity. A lot of creativity comes from the business side of things, and it really creates demand for IT services as these applications kind of take root and are successful. So obviously, yeah, users will be able to create data tables, be able to interact with them like they do in Excel. But there'll be more data types that they can use, and it'll be higher performance. The filtering will be much better. It'll just be a much more robust data store than, say, a SharePoint list. That said, there's going to be, because this is the lightweight version, there's going to be some limitations. And one of them is all these objects, all these bots, all the data, is going to be contained within a single team. So you're not going to be able to go to a second team and then be able to say, let me use data from another team. This limits its ability to be used as an enterprise tool. And that's kind of a good and bad thing, because these are citizen developers, and maybe you don't want them to creating these kind of rat's nest of data where they're cross-linking between different teams, and if one thing changes, everything falls apart. In this case, one department or one team can be creating their application, and they're only going to screw up their own stuff. It'll all be highly containerized. Of course, when if it becomes a successful application, you'll be able to take this data and move it into something like DataFlex Pro. you'll be able to upgrade it, and then it becomes an enterprise-wide table that can be accessed much more broadly. So another screenshot of this, you can see this is a really nice bot builder application. So I would expect a real surge of bot building once this comes out. You'll be able to build bots in Teams. This is part of the free version of DataFlex, where you'll be able to kind of workflow out questions and responses asked by a bot, and then there's obviously a little test interface here. You can deploy that to this team. So that's what you may have heard about Power Virtual Agents, but that is part of the Power Apps platform, and Microsoft Teams now is, I think, becoming part of that Power Platform. That's how Microsoft is talking about it, because Microsoft Teams is becoming the front end for the Power Platform. So Power Virtual Agents is that bot builder tool that I think once it becomes available with such a nice interface like this, I think you'll see more popularity of the bots in Teams. So what are the benefits from DataFlex is really, it's going to solve a lot of the SharePoint limitations. That's really why there's an appeal to it. As the biggest thing that we've been dealing with for many, many years, ever since SharePoint really launched, is SharePoint is not a relational database. In DataFlex, we'll be able to define those relationships between tables and be able to make sure that tables adhere to the rules that are defined. And I assume it'll be much better indexed for that reason and more responsive. In SharePoint, that was always super clunky, and people, a lot of times in Power Apps, you could kind of fake a relational database using SharePoint lists, but it's clunky and complicated. So DataFlex should be able to resolve that. That ties into the filtering large data sets, limited number of field types, security model that's really designed more for documents than data, and then having different development test and production environments. That should be built into DataFlex, where you can see, like in that prior screen, we at least had some like a testing interface. I assume, in theory, DataFlex is supposed to allow for more of these dev test prod implementations. And finally, the big advantage is now there's a path forward to move to an enterprise solution. So you can build a nice application in DataFlex. If the business users really like it and the IT blesses it, you can then make it part of your enterprise data model in DataFlex Pro. So yeah, I think once DataFlex is out there, and literally this is within months, so you really need to pay attention. This could be, you're going to see a lot of users adopt this. It does feel like, I mentioned down here, feels like a reboot of Microsoft Access, because all of a sudden all these users are going to have this new tool, and it may just appear one day and they're going to jump on top of that really quickly, and it may catch some of these IT users by surprise, or the IT department by surprise. So it's good that you're in this meeting, you're aware that this is coming. You definitely want to get a handle on this quickly, because users will find it very, very fast, and they'll start building stuff very, very quickly. Microsoft, of course, that they're totally fine with that. They want to unleash that creativity, but it is up to IT to kind of define those guardrails and what's appropriate at your own organization. Some of the limitations around DataFlex. So today, the key thing that I mentioned is that these applications cannot be shared across teams. So the data, the bots, now you can move objects between teams. So you can probably take a bot and send the code over to another team and reuse it over there. But you're essentially then have 2 bots to manage, not 1. So that's a key limitation. But the advantage to that is it's highly containerized, so that citizen developers aren't messing each other's stuff up. And then there's a total limitation of, I think, 1 million rows per table. It's not really clear on that. I don't know if it's per environment or per table. I think it's probably per table, and a total cap of 2 gigabytes of storage, which for most types of tables, that's a lot of storage. Unless you're storing a really complex data type, and I don't know if complex data types are supported, like images. Probably they aren't. I would think you would just have a link to an image, but this should provide you ample storage for quite the complex application. Okay. So again,
I was going to say, Chris, we do have a question in the chat. Would there be a Power Automate trigger and/or action that would allow for Dataflex data to transfer between different teams?
So Power Apps should be able to read the Dataflex data. That's what I've heard. So you can put a Power App on top of Dataflex. Now, I don't think that there is at this point any way that they're going to make it easy to kind of sync data across systems. I'm sure somebody could kind of hack their way into it, maybe by reading a table and then writing it back to another table. But I think that they're looking at that isolation of data and objects, that you're able to maybe copy objects on a one-time basis, but not do a sync using like a Power Automate across those different systems. So I think it's unlikely that we'll have an easy solution for that, because it kind of runs counter to what Microsoft's trying to do. So I think, in theory, I think that's possible, but I think it's also problematic. Anytime you have a sync process, there's always a high likelihood that somebody will change a table in a different location, and then that process breaks. So I just think that that's not going to happen. And of course, it works counter to Microsoft's goal to sell Dataflex Pro licenses, right? They really want you to say, hey, if you want this to be an enterprise tool and you want a master list of data that the entire enterprise can use, then you need the Dataflex Pro license for that, which I think is a per user license as well. Okay, any other questions? I know this was quick, but we did want to reach out. If no one has any questions about this, I'm curious, are people, and you could do it by raising your hand, are people today building apps in Teams, like Power Apps or Flow, things that is exposed via Teams? Any of our guests? Jim, Mark, Maggie? Oh, Maggie is, okay. Or was that, sorry.
We got Casey.
Casey is, yeah. So Casey, could you just quickly, come off mute and kind of describe the type of application you're building? Because we really want to hear like what people are doing, and share that information.
All right. So I haven't really gotten much past just dipping my toe in the water and just testing things out. I don't have anything as far as like a production, as far as like anything we're actually using. I'm just kind of checking it out to see like what the possibilities are.
Okay. So, and specifically, what are you checking out?
I've been looking at the from a Power Apps perspective, I've been looking at, what are some of the existing templates and how can I tweak those? And I haven't really gotten much past that.
Right. Yeah. And that's where we're seeing a lot of companies are at. is we typically see either power users or IT people kind of checking things out. Not a lot of people are building applications at this point. It's really been people, in many cases, Teams hasn't been around more than 6 months. A lot of people have just deployed it. There are people that certainly have been in longer, but a lot of times there's not a high level of awareness of that you can build these applications in Teams, and that there's not a high level awareness that a lot is coming. I mean, again, how many people, how many of the guests here were aware of DataFlex, had heard about that? Okay, I'll take it. It sounds like no one was really.
Actually, I'd heard of DataFlex because I've been waiting for something like that to get past the SharePoint issues that we have at work.
Okay. So you are building applications based on SharePoint lists, or your team is, or?
Yeah, we were trying to, because we wanted to integrate it with Teams, but there was no easy way to do it. And I work in healthcare, so IS is strict about everything.
Right.
Yeah, so this is a way for us to build like tools internally for us and automate things, but we were just having a really hard time trying to get past where to store it and have it be integrated, because IS was always like, no, or we don't have time to help you.
Oh, right. Sure.
Yeah.
So DataFlex, so I would, it sounds like you come out of the business side, so you're not necessarily in IT yourself, right, Leslie?
No. So
Yeah.
basically I do data analytics, but we end up kind of building things for everybody.
Yeah, and I do hear that Power BI is supposed to be able to read DataFlex data. So I don't know if you're using Power BI, but that is an important note.
Yeah, because we'd already tried playing with Power BI. Technically, it's not in our system, but we kind of whined until we got it, because we work with PHI, and then they're like, well, you can't use this, this, or this. I'm like, so they gave us like a test version that they've been using to potentially roll out.
Right.
But it would be a lot nicer to have this type of integration, because I'm responsible for a lot of the business reporting. And that doesn't have all the PHI rules. So I'd like to automate it. So I'm excited.
Yeah. So, I mean, you are the kind of the target market for this product. Like, I think IT people might get a little less excited about this, but from the business side, it's like I've always had trouble getting enough IT resources to help me out with this. And so, I feel like it's not terribly complicated, and I can build something myself if I have the right interface. So I think they'll definitely it'll be interesting to see what happens with this, because it is going to be, I mean, they're saying it's going to be fairly soon. So this is just going to launch out there, and then I suspect people are in a lot of different companies are spending a lot of time in Teams, and will jump on top of it pretty quickly once it is launched out there.
So
yeah, oh, go ahead.
So I am in IT, and having the DataFlex does concern me, because it is like Access, and Access has security holes. Does DataFlex have security holes?
Well, I would doubt that you would have any security issues but it's not going to be perfect, because, for example, it really depends on your security of Microsoft Teams. Do you allow guest users into Microsoft Teams? And if you have a guest user in Microsoft Teams, will they be able to see the DataFlex applications and DataFlex data? That actually is kind of an unknown right now. The assumption is yes, external users, because they're kind of members of that team, and this DataFlex data and applications live within that team, that external users should be able to interact with those apps as well. And that there's a whole bunch of really interesting use cases for that. But yes, from an IT perspective, you should be concerned about security and saying, hey, if we have this data stored in here, there is the potential for external users. Now, that is well authenticated and everything, but it depends on the controls that you have in your organization to manage external users.
And it's just not external users, it's also internal, because with Access, if you have PII and items and stuff in there, people can get a backdoor access to it. And that would be I think our same concern. So when this all of a sudden appears, is it going to appear with an upgrade?
So yes, it'll come out with a version, right? So there'll be a version that's pushed out at some point. Now you should be getting notifications of it prior to this, but unfortunately, I get a lot of notifications from Microsoft about upgrades happening all the time, so I don't always see those. But this one I'll definitely be paying attention to, right? Because yeah, this is an important one, and yeah, it is one that IT needs to be kind of getting a handle on, and really understanding.
Who's going to get the notification about the upgrade? Is it going to be I'm a SharePoint developer. Is it going to be more like somebody who is installing and manages it? Who will be getting that notification?
For Office 365, anybody who's an admin in an admin role gets notifications of upgrades. Now, if you're not in an admin role, you can go subscribe at one of the Microsoft services to like, hey, please notify me. You have to do a little more work to get those notifications. But when you're in an admin role on a tenant, then yeah, you get almost daily updates on things that are being released.
Could I ask that you provide that process to get notifications when you
sure.
the video?
Yep.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And that was Leslie, right?
Oh yeah. So
no, that was Shar talking.
Oh, Shar.
Shar
yeah.
Chaput. CHA.
Okay, got it.
Oh, so what I was going to say, what we're looking forward to is we're trying to build an app to track requests between business development and our team. So that we were looking at trying to build something with planner and task, but then they're rolling out lists, which looks a lot better for what we want to do. So we're kind of waiting for that to roll out.
Yeah. So, and Microsoft lists are just SharePoint lists rebranded. So, but it may be a little easier to work with for sure. Now, there is a new lists application that is going to aggregate tasks, right, across all your different tools. And is that the one you're referring to? Or you?
What we were looking to do was have someone submit something in forms, and then it would just send out emails for approvals through our managers. And then once everything got accepted, it was going to go into a list in tasks where we could update like the different statuses and then have it automatically email the requesters based on where we were at. So that was what our first use case that we were trying to get through. And there was another use case I wanted was to build like a clinic log app without personal information for business reporting. Because we really struggle with our on-site staff doing Excel, but we're thinking if we could just have them click a few things. So when they get a new patient coming in, like we have this patient, they're here for this for that. And then it would just automatically all feedback and managers could see what was going on at the different clinics in a summarized view instantaneously without us having to do stuff. That would make my life brilliant.
Right. Yeah. And that seems totally reasonable to do. I mean, in a perfect world, I don't know if all those clinics are using Teams, but I would be having like a team per clinic, right? And then having an app in there that just automatically knows what clinic you're talking about, right? And
exactly.
Hopefully understand a lot of the context of the business based on the location. So, and then based on that team, it could route it for the right approval to the proper, I don't know. I assume everything doesn't go to one person for approval, but there are probably like 5 or, who knows? Different, I don't know if different clinics have different approvers or different departments within, different specialties, but so yeah, that's the type of, really you're talking about the sweet spot for these applications, not just DataFlex, but Power Apps and, the Power Automate that and using Microsoft Forms maybe on the front end or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think DataFlex in your situation, like that could be a really nice target application for you. Okay, well, thanks for chiming in with those different examples. That was helpful. I mean, I think one of the key things is we are seeing this friction that Access brought, which is great. We can build applications, but a lot of people are terrible at building applications and don't understand basic concepts of relational databases. So we need to make sure that when business users do that, they have some training and that they are have a certain level of competency around that, so that we don't code ourselves into a corner and become dependent on an application that we have no idea how it works, or it's just really clunky, or it doesn't scale well, or whatever issues that might surface. So definitely DataFlex is going to be kind of bubbling up into our governance discussions. It was interesting that we kind of already kind of came across that today. Okay, any other questions?
Or if anybody else would like to share any sort of apps that they're working on and kind of need some ideas on what tools to look for, great questions to ask. Or if you have general Microsoft Teams questions, we got Chris on the line, so it's a great time to pepper him with a complex Teams governance or licensing question. Chris actually loves licensing questions.
Oh, right. Yeah. Has everybody gotten the new version of Teams with the controls for the meeting at the top now?
I don't know what you're talking about, so I'm going to assume no.
Yeah. The if you go into the ellipse menu, there's a new together mode, which is in the new version of Teams. That may actually be the new meeting experience may be turned off for you. So that's something I recommend doing is there's a really interesting new together mode feature where you can see everybody's video in kind of like a conference room setting. Rather than just being squares, you'll see it in a more natural setting. And there's some other nice features that are in there as well. So just be aware that there's a major, in fact, I think, Joe, you just had yours turned on this morning. I turned mine on a day or two ago. But yeah, recommend that you try to enable that. I can actually show you quickly where to do that.
He just threw a picture of Chris in together mode by himself.
So if you go up into settings and
like your screen is not sharing, Chris.
Oh, sorry, really? Oh, okay, it's telling me it is, but let me try that again.
Actually, could be me because I'm in together mode.
Oh, yeah, it's probably you.
There it goes. It's definitely sharing again.
So under my settings, so I went there for under my icon settings. If you have the new version, you're gonna have turn on new meeting experience. And this is really nice. The new meeting and calls will open as separate windows. That's like for this presentation, it was fantastic because I had, everybody's image on one side and the meeting on the other side. Or the screen share on the other side. Before that was really clunky where you had to kind of go back and forth between those things. But this also has that new together mode that Joe just showed off, which really works nice for larger meetings where we're, before we used to tell people if it's more than 9 people, people should turn off their video because it's too distracting. But now in this together mode, it's a little bit more natural interface to have like a bunch of videos running at the same time. Okay. Yeah, and that was just released a few days ago, so thought you might get users asking about that if this version has been pushed out to you, which it depending on your tenant, you may not be seeing these options yet. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone. If there aren't any more questions, I'll wrap it up. And this was just a quick thing. We wanted to focus on Teams, and the key takeaway from this is simply get ready for applications in Teams, because Microsoft is really talking it up, and I think they're really going to be pushing it. And we've got some major new tools coming out. There's already good stuff in there with Power Apps that you can use today in Power Automate. But DataFlex will kind of add a whole new wrinkle in this, and IT and business users both need to be aware of what's coming up and be thinking about use cases for this and preparing for that. Okay.
Cool. Thank you, Chris.
All right.
And then
Thanks.
For people that are looking for a link to download the presentation, I'll be sending that out in a little while. I got to download it and then upload it to a YouTube page. It's going to be a private link. So yeah, you should all get that hopefully in the next day. And feel free to ping me if you don't hear from me. Other than that, thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.